Layla Thompson had just finished a long day at the community center where she helped arrange food drives and job fairs. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in soft pink and orange stripes. She slid out of her dark blue sedan and leaned. Against the cool metal door, her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she ignored it. She wanted a quiet moment before heading home. The street was calm, with neat lawns and tidy sidewalks. A few windows glowed warmly as families prepared dinner. Layla took a deep breath, feeling a gentle breeze against her face. She checked the address on the small card in her hand. Tonight she was planning with friends to hold a discussion on peaceful protest tactics. She felt proud of the work she did. To bring people together. Just as she dug her keys from her purse, the red and blue lights of two police cruisers burst around the corner. Tires screamed on asphalt. Her heart jumped. The cars skidded to a stop within inches of her. Two officers jumped out, hands on their holsters, faces set in hard lines. "Drop the phone," one officer barked, his voice sharp and loud. Layla froze. She held her empty hands up, phone still tucked safely. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. The officer's eyes narrowed. He took a step forward. "Hands where I can see them," he said again. His partner moved behind Layla, keeping his gun trained on her side. Neighbors peeked from windows, their faces full of shock and worry.
Ellis.
Breath came fast now, her pulse thundering in her ears. She tried to explain, "I'm Layla Thompson. I live here. I was just leaving." But the officer only shouted, "Don't move." His tone was fierce. The street lights flickered on as dusk settled. A few yards away, an elderly man stepped onto his porch, holding a flashlight. He raised it slowly, squinting at the scene. He called out, "Is everything okay?" The officer glared at him, then turned back to Layla. The red and blue lights painted Layla's face in harsh colors. Her chest tightened. She felt fear like icy water rushing through her. Without warning, a loud pop rang out. Time seemed to split. Layla's mind froze as she felt a sharp pain in her shoulder. She stumbled, her knees hitting the rough pavement. Her phone flew from her back pocket, spinning and landing screen down with a crack. The world blurred at the edges. Layla tried to lift her hand to her shoulder, but the pain was too fierce. She dropped to the ground, pressing her fingers against her shirt where warm liquid seeped through. Her breath caught in her throat. Neighbors rushed out now, phones raised to record. A young woman screamed, "She's bleeding!" Another man dialed 911, shouting into the phone. The officers stood frozen for a moment, as if surprised by what had happened. Then one of them called for backup, his voice trembling slightly. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder and closer. Layla's vision darkened at the edges. She tried to focus on the nearest Fison neighbor named Carlos, whose eyes were wide with horror. He knelt beside her, placing a trembling hand on her back. "Layla, stay with me," Carlos whispered. "Help's coming." Layla blinked, trying to speak, but her voice failed her. Her mind raced. Community meetings, her mother's smile, her sister Aisha's laughter. She felt a sweat break out on her forehead, mixed with the cold that ran down her spine. Police tape fluttered in the wind before arriving officers blocked off the street. Fire truck pulled up behind the ambulances, its lights adding to the chaotic glow. City workers hurried to clear the way. Inside the first ambulance, paramedics worked quickly. One pressed gauze to Layla's wound while another hooked her to a heart monitor. She lay on the stretcher, the world rocking beneath her. Her eyes flicked open and closed, each breath a struggle. She saw the paramedic's lips move, but could not hear words clearly. She felt hands lifting her, securing her body with tight straps. Every jolt on the ride to the hospital sent sharp pain through her arm. At the hospital, bright lights and shouting voices greeted her. Doctors and nurses moved swiftly around her bed. A curtain closed off her side of the emergency room. A nurse clipped a bracelet around her wrist and asked for her emergency contacts. Layla tried to whisper Ayesha's name. Her voice was soft, barely a breath. A nurse nodded and disappeared. The room smelled of antiseptic and urgency. Machines beeped steadily.
Ow.
Layla drifted in and out of awareness, hearing distant voices say things like stable and need more scans.
Outside.
Aisha pounded the hospital doors, frantic. She had gotten the call from Carlos, who had driven her swiftly here. She rushed through the waiting area, her heart in her throat. At her sister's door, emergency staff stepped out, their faces grim. An older doctor placed a hand gently on Aisha's shoulder. "She's in surgery now," he said quietly. Aisha's legs felt weak. She sank into a nearby chair, her hands covering her face. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Please let her be okay," she whispered to the empty hallway. Back in the operating room, surgeons worked to repair the damage. They spoke. In low tones, focused on stopping the bleeding and preventing infection. Layla's shirt lay in a small pile, soaked with blood. A cold light shone above, making everything look pale. Instruments clinked, and sterile gloves rustled. Outside the room, Carlos and neighbors gathered, exchanging worried glances. Young reporter from the local news channel slipped out of the crowd with a camera crew, setting up in the corridor. Late into the night, the surgeon finally emerged. He spoke to Aisha in hushed words. "She's stable for now. We managed to control the bleeding. She has a long recovery ahead, but she'll pull through." Aisha nodded, relief and fear warring inside her. She asked about Layla's condition. "She's strong," the surgeon said, "physically and mentally, but this will change her life. We need to watch for infection and help her heal slowly." Aisha promised to stay by her side. As the doctor left, Aisha sat back, her eyes fixed on the closed door of the recovery room. She thought of all the work her sister had done in the community. She remembered Layla's warm smile, her fierce determination. Now that determination would be needed more than ever. Outside, the protesters who had gathered at the precinct now stood in small groups, talking quietly about the shooting. Some held signs with Layla's name. Others recorded videos to share on social media. The city felt tense, as though holding its breath until Layla woke. At midnight, an eerie silence fell over the hospital. The lights in the hallway glowed softly, and the only sounds were the distant beeps of machines and the whisper of shoes on linoleum.
Aisha
Sat alone, eyes red, clutching a photo of her sister. She whispered, "You're safe now, Layla. Rest." Far away, a phone rang in a dark office. Its caller ID marked simply unknown. A voice spoke softly on the other end. "We need to talk about Thompson." The line went silent and then clicked off. In that quiet moment, Aisha did not know that this was only the beginning of a long journey toward truth and justice. Night had fallen on the city when Layla first opened her eyes in the quiet hospital room. The glow from the window showed empty streets below. She felt a dull ache in her shoulder and heard a soft hum from the machines beside her bed. Her breath came in slow, gentle rises and falls. For a moment, she lay still, letting the calm wash over her. Then she remembered the shooting. Her heart stumbled, and she tried to move, but her arm refused. She felt a wave of fear. What had happened? How had she ended up here? Soft knock sounded at the door. A nurse in pale blue scrubs pushed it open. She smiled kindly.
"You're awake,"
she said. "You've been through a lot, but you're safe now. The doctor will be in soon." Layla nodded, her throat tight. The nurse adjusted her pillow and checked the machines. Layla watched her steady hands and felt a small comfort in the nurse's calm voice. She wanted to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. The nurse placed a cool cloth on Layla's forehead and whispered, "Rest now. You're doing very well." Down the hall, Layla's sister Aisha waited in the cramped family lounge. She sat on a hard chair, clutching her phone. Her eyes traced the faint cracks in the wall as she tried to remember her last clear thought. She had called their mother in Detroit just after arriving. Now her fingers shook as she scrolled through messages from friends and neighbors. Everyone wanted updates. She had told them only that Layla was stable, but stable felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter. She wrapped her arms around herself and closed her eyes. She wished she could trade places with her sister, take the pain and leave Layla whole and unharmed. A reporter from the local news channel stood near the entrance of the emergency wing, recording videos on her phone. She wore a dark jacket and held a small microphone. A security guard approached her. "Madame, You need to stay back, he said firmly. The reporter's eyes flashed disappointment, but she nodded and stepped aside. Down the corridor, a group of Layla's friends paced. They whispered prayers and clutched each other's hands. One of them, Marcus, wiped tears from his cheeks. He had known Layla since childhood. He remembered her laughter ringing through the church halls, her kindness when he first lost his job. Now he stood helpless, unable to protect her. In the recovery room, Layla felt groggy. Her thoughts felt heavy, like stones in water. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 3:12 a.m. The world outside was dark and still. She wondered what had become of the officers who shot her. Would they face questions? Would she ever know why it happened? She pressed her lips tight, determined to rest until morning, but sleep did not come easily. She heard faint voices in the hall, footsteps, a soft click of a camera, the rustle of a gown. She closed her eyes and tried to block it all out. Back in the family lounge, Aisha jumped when the phone in her hand rang. The caller ID read unknown. Her heart pounded again. She remembered the call the night before, the deep voice asking for Layla's rank and serial number, then hanging up. She answered now with trembling lips. "Hello?" she whispered. Silence. Then the same deep voice. "Is Layla Thompson there?" Nisha pressed her hand over her mouth. "Who is this?" she asked. The voice offered no name. It's only a low, controlled tone. "We need to speak with her. It is urgent." Then the line went dead. Aisha stared at the phone. She sank into her chair, her mind racing. Who called in the middle of the night? And why did they think Layla was in the army? Patients rolled gurneys past the lounge, bound for surgeries and tests. Nurses hurried with charts. Aisha could see through the small window into the bustling ward. She thought of Layla lying just down the hall under bright lights, surrounded by strangers who cared for her body but did not know her heart. She wished she could bring Layla home safe and warm, away from all this. But the city had changed now. The shooting had sent a ripple through their community. Every friend and neighbor now watched their own steps. No one felt truly safe. In the early hours, word of Layla's shooting spread on social media. Videos from neighbors' phones showed red and blue lights pulsing against the houses. Some posts claimed Layla had resisted arrest. Others insisted she was unarmed. A hashtag Justice for Layla, trended online. Strangers argued in comment threads. Some blamed the police, others defended the officers' actions. Marcus scrolled angrily, saw a comment mocking Layla's activism, calling her troublemaker. He felt fury rise in his chest, but he reminded himself of Layla's voice, calm and clear when she talked about change. He wiped his tears and decided he would not let hate win. At dawn, the sun crept in pale beams through the windows. A doctor came by to see Layla. He checked her vitals and smiled gently. "You're doing well," he said. "No more fever. Your wound is clean. If you rest today, we hope to move you out of intensive care." Layla tried to nod, but her head felt heavy. She whispered, "Thank you." The doctor patted her hand and slipped out. She closed her eyes and let relief wash over her. She was alive. She was safe. But she knew she could not stay in this room forever. Questions waited for her outside. Questions about why she was shot, who had called her name at midnight, and what secrets she held. Aisha arrived at Layla's bedside later that morning. She carried a small bouquet of daisies, Layla's favorite flower. She set them on the bedside table. Layla opened her eyes and smiled weakly. "They're beautiful," she said, her voice soft. Aisha sat beside her, took her hand, and said, "You're going to be okay. I'm here." Layla squeezed her sister's hand. She felt tears in her own eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. They talked quietly about small, everyday things. Layla asked about their mother. Aisha told her mama was praying and would come soon. The sisters laughed softly at a shared memory of trying to bake cookies and ending up with burnt dough. That moment, fear faded, and love filled the space between them. By midday, Layla was moved from intensive care to a private room. The bright sun lit the walls, making the space feel warmer. Visitors arrived. Carlos, who had stopped traffic too, helper Marcus, who brought her favorite snack, a peanut butter sandwich, and two women from the community center who whispered encouragement. Each visitor reminded Layla of the life waiting for her beyond these walls. She saw their faces full of hope and worry, and felt a spark of the old courage that drove her work. She realized her story was bigger than one shooting. It was about each person who cared for her, each voice that cried for justice. That afternoon, a federal agent visited. He wore a dark suit and introduced himself as Special Agent Parker. He explained he worked for a unit that looked into civilian shootings and possible misconduct. Layla's heart fluttered. She remembered the midnight calls. He asked her if she remembered anything unusual before the shooting. Layla thought hard. She told him about her meeting plans and how the officers had shouted at her to drop her phone. She mentioned the strange man on the porch, the light he held. Parker nodded and took notes carefully. He asked if she had any connection to the Army. Layla shook her head. "I'm not in the Army," she said. He frowned slightly as though uncertain. Then he said, "We may have more questions later, Ms. Thompson. Right now, rest." He left, closing the door softly behind him. When the door clicked shut, Layla felt a chill. The federal agent's visit made everything feel serious. She realized this was not a simple case of a poor mistake. Someone had put her in danger. Her mind reached back to a conversation she had months ago. She had overheard two contractors from the Army Supply Office talking about secret payments and threats. She had no proof then, only a nagging worry. She had told Aisha in passing, but had not pursued it. Now she wondered if her loose remark had painted a target on her back. Outside, the hospital corridor buzzed with activity. Nurses and orderlies. "Move quickly." A cleaning crew wheeled a cart down the hall. Layla imagined the uniformed officers who had shot her now behind desks, filing reports, talking to lawyers. She felt a surge of anger, but she held it back, breathing in slowly. She would need her strength. She would need to find out the truth. She looked at Aisha, her anchor in this storm, and knew she was not alone. As evening fell, the sisters made plans. Layla would rest tonight. Tomorrow, they would ask the doctor for more details of her condition. They would call their lawyer. They would reach out to the reporter who had covered the shooting to ensure the story stayed truthful. Layla felt a spark of purpose flicker inside. She had survived. Now she would fight back. She closed her eyes as Aisha brushed a strand of hair from her face and whispered, "I love you." Ella smiled, her hope renewed. The night might hold more darkness, but together they would find the light. Asked ChatGPT. Late that night, Layla woke to the clicking of her own phone on the bedside table. Her heart thudded in her chest. She reached out, her arms sore, and picked it up. The screen showed unknown caller. She frowned. She had asked the hospital to silence calls after midnight. Yet here it was again. She rested back against the pillows and pressed the green button. A calm, low voice spoke. "Miss Thompson, we need your cooperation." Layla's hand trembled. "Who is this?" she asked. The voice did not answer. Instead it said, "This concerns national security. You have information we need." Layla tried to clear her mind. "I'm in the hospital. I'm not in the Army. I'm not sure what you want." The line went dead. Layla stared at the blank screen. She called Aisha's number but got voicemail. She tried again. Still nothing. She thought of the last call, the midnight visits by agents. She felt uneasy. She lay back and closed her eyes. She needed sleep. But every time she drifted off, the memory of the shooting came back. In her dreams, red and blue lights pulsed. She woke with a gasp. Morning light crept through the curtains as Layla woke again. Her arm ached. She scanned the small room. Aisha was seated in the chair, head tipped back against the wall. Her phone lay beside her, screen lit with missed calls. Layla whispered, "Aisha." Her sister stirred and opened her eyes. "You called?" Aisha asked, worry in her voice. Layla told her about the late-night call. Aisha's face went pale. They sat together on the narrow bed. Layla said, "Someone thinks I have secrets." Aisha squeezed her hand. "We'll figure this out," she said softly. "First, let's get you feeling stronger. Then we talk to our lawyer." Layla nodded. She felt grateful for her sister's calm strength. After breakfast, a lawyer named Jamal arrived. He wore a dark suit but moved with easy confidence. He greeted them with kind eyes. "I'm here to help," he said. Layla felt a small relief. She told him everything. The shooting, the hospital, the strange calls, the agent's questions about the army. Jamal listened without interrupting. When Layla finished, Jamal said, "We need to collect evidence. We need your medical reports, any videos from your phone, and witness statements. We also need to find out who called and why." He passed them a folder. Inside were blank pages and printed sheets to record details. "Write down every call, every visitor, every question asked," he said. Aisha nodded and took notes. Jamal left, promising to return that afternoon with more advice. For the rest of the morning, Layla and Aisha reviewed messages and emails. Layla found a note she had sent months ago to a mentor in the Army contracting office. In it, she wrote about rumors of bribes and threats. She had not thought much of it then, but now it seemed important. She showed the email to Aisha. "Aisha, read it slowly. You mentioned payments and threats," she said. Maybe that triggered someone. Layla frowned. "I spoke in general terms. I didn't accuse anyone by name." She shivered at the thought that her simple words might have put her in danger. By midday, the room felt crowded with papers and worries. Layla closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought of the community center. She would return there one day, but now her work was on hold. She needed justice for herself and for her cause. She opened her eyes and said, "We keep going." That afternoon, Agent Parker returned. He carried a thin file and wore a suit that seemed too stiff for the warm day. Layla sat up in bed. Aisha stood behind her. Parker introduced a younger agent named Lewis. He gave Layla a clipboard with questions. Did she remember faces, voices, words? Parker asked calmly. Layla answered as best she could. She recalled the officers' harsh voices and the man on the porch with a flashlight. He remembered the cold metal of the gun, the sudden pain. Parker nodded and closed the file. "We will review this." He looked at Aisha. "We may need to speak with you too." Aisha nodded. Parker added, "These late calls, those were not from us." Layla felt a chill. "Then who?" she whispered. Parker shook his head. "I wish I knew." "We will try." To trace the numbers, he stood, nodded politely, and left. As the agents walked away, Layla felt a mixture of relief and fear. The truth was still out there, hidden behind walls of power and secrecy. She and Aisha returned to the papers on the bed. Aisha said, "Let's organize everything. Medical report, witness names, emails, calls." They worked side by side, sister and sister assembling the pieces of a puzzle that felt too large. Later, a nurse wheeled in medication. She smiled at Layla and offered water. Layla thanked her. The nurse hummed as she checked the IV. Layla watched her calm routine and wished life were as simple as hospital care: clean sheets, predictable pills, gentle voices. Outside, the world was messier. That evening, Aisha left to get dinner and refill their water bottles. She promised to be back soon. Layla lay back and closed her eyes. She thought of the stranger's voice on the phone. She remembered how calm it was, how it claimed national security. Who did they think she was? She pressed her hand against her heart and whispered, "I'm only me." Night came again, and Layla braced herself. Her phone buzzed at exactly midnight. She sat up and looked at the screen. Unknown caller. She stared at it for a moment. Then this time she pressed record before answering. The line clicked. "Miss Thompson," said the quiet voice. Layla heard it clearly. She began the recording. Called again. "What do you want?" The voice paused. Then it said, "Tell your sister to stop talking." Layla's blood ran cold. She gripped the phone tightly. "My sister's not talking to you. Who are you?" The voice said. "We know about the meeting you planned." "You are stepping on powerful toes." Layla swallowed. "I have a right to meet. I have a right to speak." A click, and then the line went dead. Layla pressed the button that saved the recording. Her hand shook. She lay back, heart racing. She felt frightened, but she also felt a spark of anger. Someone was trying to scare her. Someone wanted her to stay silent. but she would not. She thought of the neighbors who cheered her when she organized food drives. She thought of her friends who waited outside the hospital. She thought of her mother, counting the days until she could hug her again. Early the next morning, Aisha returned. She found Layla awake, phone in hand. "I recorded it," Layla said. She handed the phone to Aisha and explained the warning. Aisha's eyes widened. She backed away slowly. "This is serious," she whispered. "We need to give this recording to Jamal and to the police." By mid-morning, Jamal, the lawyer, arrived with 2 officers from the Internal Affairs Unit. They set up a small table in the room and listened to the recording. The clarness of the voice made their faces harden. One officer said, "This is intimidation. We will open a new file." Jamal nodded. "We will protect you and your sister." Layla felt a wave of relief wash over her. The burden of silence lifted a little. She held Aisha's hand and whispered, "We're not alone." Outside, the sun shone bright. The air seemed warmer, as if the city itself had turned a hopeful corner. Layla closed her eyes and felt the courage return. She would keep speaking. She would keep fighting. She would not let fear win. As the team left, Layla studied the door. She wondered who had wanted her quiet and why they had chosen a shooting. And phone calls? She did not yet know all the answers. She knew this. She would wake tomorrow ready to find the truth. And she would not walk away until she found it. Ask ChatGPT. Late in the morning, Layla's room felt full of tension. She sat upright in bed, wrapped in a soft white blanket, her sister Aisha by her side. The lawyer, Jamal, and 2 internal affairs officers had just left after hearing the midnight recording. Now the quiet returned, but it felt heavy, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Layla blinked at the sunlight dancing on the windowsill. Her shoulder ached, but her mind burned with questions. Who wanted her silenced? And why? Just then, the door opened softly. A local reporter named Nina stepped in, clutching a notebook and a small recorder. Nina had covered the shooting from the start. She looked tired, her eyes shadowed from sleepless nights chasing details. Yet when she saw Layla, her face lit up with relief. "Layla, I'm so glad you're awake," she said in a low voice. She paused at the foot of the bed, then quietly introduced herself to Aisha. "I want to help tell your story the right way," Nina said. "I found something you need to know." Layla felt a spark of hope. "What is it?" she asked. Softly, Nina sat in the chair by the window and turned on her recorder. "I've been digging into those contractors you mentioned," she began. "The ones from the Army Supply Office." Layla listened, heart pounding. She remembered those rumors. She overheard in passing months ago. She had mentioned them briefly to Aisha, then forgotten. Now they were the key to everything. Nina explained that she had spent days filing public records requests, combing through government documents and interviewing sources who wished to stay anonymous. She slid photocopies of documents across the small table. The pages were stained. With coffee rings and scribbled notes, Layla picked one up. It showed a ledger of payments from an Army contractor called Apex Supply. Next to each payment was a project code and a small note, approved by Colonel Michaels. In one entry, a double payment appeared in extra $30,000 labeled urgent, confidential. Layla stared at the numbers. She whispered, "I remember that name, Michaels. He was at the meeting I attended." She thought back to the day she had quietly asked a friend from the center about his job. He had said he worked for Apex Supply. She had laughed and asked, "Do you get free gear?" They both chuckled. Neither had realized the deal was so shady. Now Layla's mind raced. Did those extra payments have anything to do with her shooting? Nina nodded. "There's more." She rifled through her notebook and found a folded sheet. It listed phone logs from an unlisted number late, calls to your sister and to you at midnight. Layla's hand shook as she looked at the dates and times. Each call matched the nights she had tried to sleep. Couldn't find who owned the number, Nina said. But it points to a line registered under a shell company linked to Apex Supply. Layla drew in a sharp breath. "So someone from the company tried to scare me," she said. "They thought I knew too much." Aisha pressed her hand to her mouth. Layla took a moment to absorb the news. She felt fear and anger mix like fire in her chest. She had survived a shooting. Then someone tried to break her spirit with late-night threats, and it all traced back to the same group. She clenched her fists under the blanket. "We have to show this to the federal agents," she said. "They need to know Apex Supply is involved." Nina agreed. "I'm willing to testify," she said, "but you must be careful. They've shown they'll use violence and intimidation." Jamal had returned during this conversation. He stood by the door, arms crossed. He added, "We'll file this evidence officially. I'll call Special Agent Parker first thing tomorrow. He needs every document you have." Layla felt a wave of relief. At least they had a path forward. Later that afternoon, Layla asked Aisha to bring her the folder of emails she had saved. She sat up, scanning each message. One email from last November read, "Need to expedite payment. Colonel Michaels insists on extra funds before next shipment." Another said, "Confirm receipt of confidential memo." Layla clicked open the attachment. It was a memo from one of the Army offices she had once volunteered with during a community outreach program. The memo referred to a meeting at Site 17, the same address where the two contractors had met months ago. Layla frowned. It was clear those payments were hush-money bribes to keep someone silent. She shivered at the thought that someone might kill to protect their secret. She thought of the officers at the scene of her shooting. It seemed so certain of her guilt. Had they been briefed by someone at Apex Supply? Was this part of a larger cover-up? She pressed her hand to her chest, where her heart raced. She realized the police and the contractors might be working together under the watch of powerful figures. Evening arrived, and the sun dipped low. The hospital room glowed with warm light. Layla looked out at the city below, where cars crawled. Along the busy streets, she thought of all the wheels turning, news cameras, police radios, military contractors, black SUVs. Each carried secrets she was determined to expose. She closed her eyes and let her mind rest for a moment. When she opened them again, she saw two faces at the doorway. One was Special Agent Parker, stern but determined. The other was Colonel Evelyn Michaels, in uniform, her badge gleaming on her chest. Michaels stepped forward, her posture rigid. Layla's breath caught. The colonel looked tired, her eyes shadowed. She studied Layla with a hint of regret. "Miss Thompson," she said in a low voice, "I have come to speak with you." Layla sat up and felt Aisha slide to her side. Parker introduced Michaels. "This is Colonel Michaels," he said. "She's here to answer questions." Layla swallowed hard. Michaels nodded at Parker, then turned to Layla. "I want to apologize." "Miss Thompson," she said, "my office has asked too many questions about civilian activism. Some directives went too far." Layla frowned. The colonel seemed to wrestle with her words. "I assure you," she continued, "I did not order any threat calls. I did not send anyone to hurt you." Layla studied her face. She looked sincere, but Layla had learned to be cautious. Michaels took a deep breath. "But I do know who." Did Layla's eyes widen? The colonel pointed at the recorders on Nina's table. "Those late-night calls. They came from contractors working under my command. They were told to intimidate witnesses. I did not know their methods. When I found out, I ordered them to stop. I came here to help you bring them to justice." Layla looked to Parker, who nodded. Layla thought of the ledger, the extra payments, the shell company phone. It all fit together. She held out the emails and documents. Michaels took them carefully, scanning each page. She winced at the sight of the payments labeled urgent, confidential. "This is damning evidence against Apex Supply," she said. "I will make sure this goes down the proper channels. I owe you that much." Layla felt a cautious relief. Perhaps the colonel was sincere. Perhaps she was racked with guilt. Either way, Layla now had a powerful ally inside the military system. Colonel Michaels turned to Parker. "Agent Parker, I request a full investigation of Apex Supply's contracts. Suspend all payments marked confidential. Bring the contractors in for questioning." Parker nodded. "We will." He looked at Layla and Aisha. "Ms. Thompson, you should rest now. We will protect you." Layla managed a small nod. She felt exhausted, but a spark of hope burned bright. She watched Michaels leave, her shoulders squared as she strode from the room. After the door closed, Aisha squeezed Layla's hand. "That was brave," she whispered. Layla nodded, relief mingled with fatigue. "I never thought I'd see her here," she said, but she did the right thing. Nina packed her recorder away, smiling. "We'll get this on the record," she said. "The colonel's statement will be front-page news." Layla felt a thrill. The truth would be heard that night. Layla slept more easily than before. She dreamed of clear skies and open roads. She saw herself walking outside the hospital, hand in hand with Aisha, free to speak her mind without fear. She dreamed of community meetings where laughter rang out instead of sirens. She dreamed of justice served. When she awoke, the dawn light filled the room. She felt stronger, ready to face the day. Layla knew the journey was far from over. There would be court dates, hearings, and more confrontations with those who wished to hide their crimes. But for now, she held victory in her hands. The truth. She felt the flicker of her old courage grow into a steady flame. She looked at Aisha and whispered, "Let's finish this together." They rose, ready to step out into the world and demand the justice Layla deserved. The morning sun filtered through the curtains as Layla stirred awake. Her shoulder felt firmer now, though a gentle ache remained. She lay still for a moment, listening to the soft beeps of the monitor and the distant murmur of voices in the hallway. Today was the day everything would change. Today she would stand before the world and speak her truth. Aisha slipped into the room carrying 2 steaming cups of tea. She handed one to Layla and smiled. "Good morning," she said softly. Layla took a careful sip, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She looked at her sister's bright eyes and felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you for everything," she whispered. Aisha reached across and squeezed her hand. "We're in this together." By mid-morning, a small group had gathered outside Layla's private room. Jamal, the lawyer, Special Agent Parker, Nina, the reporter, and 2 representatives from a veterans advocacy group who offered support. They brought a mobile camera setup and a microphone. Layla felt her heart flutter at the sight of the equipment. She had never planned to be on camera like this, but she knew it was necessary. Jamal leaned close and reviewed the plan with her. "You'll begin by recounting what happened the night you were shot. Then you'll explain the threats and the evidence against Apex Supply. Finally, you'll call for justice and accountability." Layla nodded, repeating the key points in her mind. She felt nervous but resolute. She looked at Aisha, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. The door opened and Nina stepped inside. She smiled warmly and said, "Whenever you're ready." Layla took a deep breath and rose slowly from her bed. She steadied herself on the side rail, then stood tall, leaning on her crutch. A hush fell over the small crew as the red light on the camera blinked. Layla cleared her throat. She spoke in a calm, steady voice, her eyes finding the camera lens as though it were a window to every home in the country.
Oh.
"My name is Layla Thompson."
Oh.
At the community center, 2 police cars arrived without warning. The officers ordered me to drop my phone. I tried to explain who I was and where I lived. I lifted my hands, but before I could move, I felt a sharp pain in my shoulder. I fell to the ground, unarmed and terrified. She paused, her gaze steady. I discovered later that someone had called those officers and falsely labeled me a threat. I learned that the calls came from a shell company tied to a military contractor called Apex Supply. I found documents showing extra payments approved by Colonel Michaels. I overheard contractors bragging about silencing witnesses. I know now that they tried to break me with bullets and with fear. Layla swallowed hard, but they did not succeed. Her voice grew strong. "I survived. I won't stay silent. I will not let intimidation win. I stand here not just for me, but for every person who has felt unsafe speaking their truth. I demand a full investigation into the actions of those who put profit and power above human life. I call on the local police department to hold their officers accountable. I call on the Department of Defense to examine every contract with Apex Supply and to punish those who use their authority to organize threats and violence. And I call on every one of you watching. Stand with me. Stand for justice, for truth, for the right of every citizen to feel safe in their own streets. Layla looked down for a moment, then lifted her head. I will heal. I will return to my work at the community center. We'll teach others how to stand up, how to organize, and how to protect one another. But first, I need your help. Speak out. Share this story. Demand that our leaders listen and act. We cannot allow fear to silence us. A hush fell over the room. Ina cut the feed and stepped forward, her eyes shining. Thank you, Layla, she said. That was powerful. Jamal stepped up and wrapped his arm around Layla's shoulders. Now you were incredible, he said. Parker nodded solemnly. We'll do everything we can to see justice done. Layla managed a small smile, feeling both relief and anticipation. That evening, a candlelight vigil formed outside the hospital's entrance. Hundreds of people held candles, their lights glowing softly against the dark sky. The march had originated at the precinct where protesters first gathered, then wound through the streets and ended here. A single path of flickering flames led up to the doors where Layla's windows glowed. Aisha stood at Layla's bedside, texting updates to friends who could not attend. Through the window, Layla could see the sea of candles and the banners that read Justice for Layla, No More Fear, in Communities United. The sound of distant chanting rose and fell like a gentle tide. Layla watched the vigil through the glass. She felt tears in her eyes, but they were tears of hope. She thought of each person, their neighbors, strangers, veterans, students united. By the belief that one life mattered, she realized her story had given others courage to stand up for themselves and for each other. The next morning, Layla was discharged from the hospital. She walked slowly, leaning on her sister and her crutch. Cameras flashed as she and Aisha stepped into the crisp air. Nina and her team were waiting, microphones extended. Layla answered a few brief questions, then continued down a red carpet of protest signs and flowers. She felt their love and support, like a gentle wind at her back. Outside the hospital, a sleek black SUV pulled up. Colonel Michaels stepped out, looking more relaxed now without the uniform's weight. She approached Layla with a small bouquet of daisies, the same flowers Layla's sister had brought the first day. They're from my wife, the colonel said quietly. She wanted me to apologize in person, not just with words. Accepted the daisies. Thank you, she said softly. Michaels offered a sincere smile. I owe more than words. I will work to make this right. As Layla and Aisha got into the waiting car, they saw Jamal waving from the curb, holding thick folders of documents. Court date set for next week, he called. We're moving fast. Jin Parker stood beside him, giving a thumbs up. Nina raised her camera and captured the moment. Layla felt a wave of gratitude flood her. That night, Layla slept in her own bed for the first time since the shooting. She drifted off to sleep, thinking of the vigil, the testimonies, the daisies, and the support that had carried her this far. She dreamed of a future where no one would have to fear speaking out, where community bonds were stronger than threats, and where justice truly served the people. In the days that followed, charges were filed against the two contractors who had organized the threats. And Internal Affairs opened a full investigation into the officers who shot Layla. The city council passed a resolution to review police call protocols, and the Department of Defense suspended the secret payments pending review. Newspapers ran front-page stories with Layla's photo, her voice echoing across the country. Through it all, Layla returned to her community center. She welcomed neighbors with warm smiles and organized a special meeting on safety and rights. She taught others how to document evidence, how to reach out to lawyers, how to support one another in times of crisis. She created a network of volunteers who agreed to watch each other's backs, a living reminder that solidarity could triumph over fear. One evening, Layla sat in the center's main hall, surrounded by friends and neighbors gathered for a potluck. Warm lights glowed overhead. Plates of rice, salad, and cakes lined the tables. Laughter and music filled the air. Someone raised a glass of iced tea and said to Layla, our hero. Everyone cheered, and Layla felt tears slip down her cheeks. She raised her own glass. To all of us, she said, because we stood together. Her sister Aisha joined her at the front. They shared a gentle hug in front of the crowd. The community broke into applause. In that moment, Layla understood that her story had become more than her own experience. It was a lesson in courage, in unity, and in the power of truth. She smiled, feeling the ache in her shoulder as a reminder of how far she had come. So, with love around her and justice in motion, Layla continued her work, living proof that one voice, one life, could inspire change for many.